Hello viewers, welcome to my channel Rahman Tutorials. I am Ma'am Abrar Jahan here, and today we are going to discuss the second part of how do organisms reproduce, class 10 biology. About types of reproduction. So there are basically two types of reproduction: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Now what is this asexual reproduction? In asexual reproduction, a single parent is needed to produce the new organisms. In asexual reproduction, only one parent is going to divide into two or more than two organisms, and here no sex is involved, and organisms which are produced during asexual reproduction are just identical to parents, because sometimes what happens, like for an example, amoeba divides by binary fission into two. That is asexual reproduction. So mother amoeba itself is dividing into two daughters, so that will be obviously identical. Now what is sexual reproduction? In sexual reproduction, it involves two parents. So here male and female, both the parents are involved to produce the fertilized egg. So here fusion of male and female gametes give rise to new organisms. Here male is also giving one gamete. Gamete means nothing but sexual cells. Male is also donating the cell. From father also we are getting one cell. From mother is also we are getting one cell. From father we are getting sperm. From mother we are getting ovum, which is getting fertilized. And then the new organism is forming. Here the new organism may not be identical to the parents. Understood? So we will see in details about asexual reproduction first, then we will move on sexual reproduction, both in plants, that is flowering plants, as well as in animals. Now the question arises, what is asexual reproduction? Just now we discussed that a mode of reproduction in which new individuals are formed from a single parent. Here no need of two parents, a father parent and the mother parent, who need to contribute their gametes to produce a daughter cell. Here one cell itself is able to divide into daughter cells. So new organisms are identical to parent. As I said now, one parent itself is dividing into daughter cells, so they may be identical in genetically also, in morphologically also. That is why we call this as clone of the parents, because they are same identical. Now the reproduction is foster mode of reproduction. Now here what happens, it is not necessary to produce only one daughter cell. They may divide very faster into 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. They can divide into many, multiple they can divide. And some of the examples of this asexual reproduction are amoeba. Amoeba does reproduction by binary fission, hydra by budding, paramecium by conjugation, euglena. Then we have planaria, then tapeworms, some of the bacteria, not only in single unicellular organisms but also in simple plants or in simple vegetative plants like potatoes, onions and ginger also. We can see asexual form of reproduction. Now we will read about the types of asexual reproduction. First we will be reading about fission. The word fission means split. One thing splitting into two or more than two. Splitting is dividing into two or more than two. So what is fission? Any organism splits to form two or more individuals is called as fission. So listen carefully children, I am not pronouncing as fusion. Fusion means it's opposite to fission. Combining of two into one or more than two into one. Here I am pronouncing it as a fission. Fission means splitting. So one organism is splitting into two or more than two individuals. There is also different types of fission: binary fission and multiple fission. The word itself says bi means two. One organism at once dividing into two organisms is called as binary fission. Multiple fission means one organism dividing more than two. Like for an example, here one bacteria is there, it is dividing into two. Then this is binary fission. And if one bacteria is there, it's dividing more than two. Then we call this as a multiple fission. Remember, when binary fission happens, when the conditions are favorable to the organism to reproduce. At the time binary fission happens. Now in binary fission, two new individuals are formed. Just now we discussed, in binary fission there are two new individuals are formed and they are just identical to the parents. And now nucleus divides only once. Now I will show you one example over here. By that time you will understand, in binary fission nucleus of the cell only divides once. That means one nucleus will divide into two nucleus. Then some of the unicellular organisms like amoeba, paramecium, euglena and bacteria shows this binary fission under favorable conditions. Why I am repeating this under favorable conditions? Because I know that if the conditions are not favorable, then multiple fission will take place. So I am repeating again and again, binary fission takes place only under favorable conditions. Now for an example, I have drawn one amoeba here. Now we know that this amoeba is a parent cell. Parent cell. Now what happens in binary fission? First, the nucleus of the amoeba will get constricted in the center. Then in the second step, the cytoplasm will also try to get constricted towards each of the nucleus. Then the nucleus divides into two and cytoplasm completely gets constricted, and when it gets matured, they divide into two daughter cells. Why I am saying daughter cells? Because mother parent cell itself it is dividing into two daughter cells. Again, when the conditions are favorable, this mother cells will also divide into daughter cells. That is why we are saying this as a daughter cell. Now, if you see here, the new species, the new organisms we can see, but where the mother is gone, mother is no more extinct because mother cell itself is divided into two daughter cells. Now, one more interesting thing is there in amoeba. Amoeba can split along any plane. It can split straight, it can split vertically, diagonally, any space, because we know that amoeba doesn't have a particular structure. But now I have drawn one more organism here. This is also a unicellular organism. This is Protozoa Leishmania donovania, which causes kala azar, right? Where the person will be always wants to be in the dark. So this organism doesn't split anywhere. For an example, this is Leishmania. It doesn't split like this horizontally or vertically, but it splits only at a particular direction and it forms two daughter, and these two daughter cells will also be just like parent cell. Understood, children? Once again I am repeating what is binary fission. Bi means two, nary fission means one cell dividing into two. So binary fission happens only when the conditions are favorable. So in binary fission, two new individuals are formed. Nucleus divides only one time. You can see here in this example, the nucleus of the amoeba getting constricted and dividing only once. It is not dividing twice or thrice. And so in these fish organisms, you can see that. You can see this in amoeba, paramecium, euglena and bacteria. And this is the process where amoeba binary fission takes place. First the cell, when the conditions become favorable, first the nucleus will get constricted, then slowly the cytoplasm will also get constricted, then the nucleus will divide into two, then when the conditions becomes more favorable, at that time the cytoplasm will also divide into two and they form two new organisms. Is it? Now we will discuss about multiple fission. As I said that multiple fission always happens in unfavorable conditions. What are the favorable conditions? Moisture, food and warmth. These are the favorable conditions for any bacteria to grow. So when the conditions are not favorable, maybe the lack of water is there, maybe the lack of warmth is there, or the lack of temperature is there, then this can happen. So in multiple fission what happens? Many new individuals are formed. In binary fission we have seen from one amoeba two daughter cells has been formed. But in multiple fission it will not happen in that way. Multiple means what? More than two. So it will happen that many new individuals will be formed. Nucleus divides repeatedly. Again, in binary fission we have seen that nucleus divides only once. But here, as so many new individuals are forming, nucleus inside the cells will keep on dividing. And now it takes place during unfavorable conditions. I said that when favorable conditions are there, binary fission will take place, and in unfavorable conditions, that time only this multiple fission takes place. And what happens in multiple fission? Cyst formation takes place. What is this exact cyst? Growing one outer covering over the newly dividing nucleus or the newly dividing organisms is called as cyst. Cyst is there as a protective layer, as well as it provides the nutrients to the dividing cells. Now, in which organisms it can take place? It can take place in amoeba, it can take place in plasmodium, and many algae also. Like for an example, now consider this as a cell and this is a nucleus. In favorable conditions, what happened? It can divide into two. That is called as binary fission. But in unfavorable condition, first it develops a cyst over it. And the nucleus, which is one, will keep on dividing into many nucleus inside. Understood? Then, when condition becomes favorable, at that time, this cyst bursts out and each individual comes out, and they will be not one, not two, more than two. That means many. That is why we call this as multiple fission. So again I am repeating, when the conditions are favorable, binary fission takes place. That means one cell divides into two, and only once the nucleus will get divided. But in multiple fission, the development of cyst takes place and the nucleus divides repeatedly and forms many daughter nuclei inside the cyst. When the condition becomes favorable, at the time this cyst bursts out and this nucleus along with the cytoplasm forms many daughter cells. So this is called as multiple fission. Then after multiple fission, we will look after budding. Budding happens in, now we will discuss about budding. Bud itself means an outgrowth. We know that a flower comes out from a bud. That means bud is something which is not common and which is growing and which is showing the sign that something new is coming up. So what is budding? A new individuals are formed as an outgrowth of the parent. On the parent body, it is not usual. It comes like a small outgrowth or a bump-like structure which grows into further and further, and when it matures, it divides. Now, daughter cell separates away from the parent, continues to exit. In amoeba and binary fission, what we have seen, an amoeba like this, it itself is dividing into two daughter cells, right? So, no more parent cell is existing. But here, in budding, parent cell will also exist and the daughter cell will also exist. And now we will see in which organisms does the budding takes place. Budding takes place in hydra, it can take place in yeast and some of the sponges also. Now first we will see the example of hydra. We know that this is an hydra. You can see that a small outgrowth, a bird has appeared here on its body. Then it starts growing into a baby hydra, but it is still attached to the mother's body. And when it has grown into a big size, when it has got maturity, it divides here. Now you can see that this is a parent hydra and this is a daughter hydra. Here parent hydra also exists and daughter hydra also exists. So this is why I said that the daughter cell separates away and parents continues to exit. Now in this way the hydra budding takes place in hydra, but budding also takes place in yeast cells. In yeast cells also buds grow on its external part of the body. But remember, it will grow in particular part of the body. It will not grow all over the body. So it will grow in particular part of the body, then it grows further into bigger size. When it gets mature, it divides into two. So this way of getting division is called as budding. Budding is also external budding. Budding happens externally as well as it happens internally. Now as we discussed, it is happening, if you can see in hydra and yeast both, it is happening externally. We can see that some outgrowth bump has come, then it has grown into a baby, then that has grown into a big baby, then it got matured and it has separated. So as though we can see this externally it is happening, we call this as an external budding. Then what is this internal budding? Internal budding is in sponge's body. What happens? Inside the sponge body, some round nucleus division happens, that is called as gemmules. Some gemmules forms and this grow, and when the condition becomes favorable, this comes out and each gemmule will grow into a separate sponge. So this way of happening budding inside, that means these are happening bud formation inside the sponge's body. So this way of happening inside the sponge body is called as internal budding. So budding is what? If you see all through, budding is nothing but an outgrowth of the parent body which grows into a baby bump. Then it will grow into a baby. When it gets matured, it divides. But here the difference between binary fission and budding is, budding parent cell also exists and daughter cell is also exists. But in binary fission, daughter cells exist but parent doesn't exist anymore.